Welcome to my channel. This is Arnold. So today we're going to talk about trees as a source of generational wealth. So just a little bit background information. What is generational wealth? So generational wealth is wealth that is passed down from one generation to the other. So based on that definition, we see two key factors. That is wealth, and also the second key factor is the action of passing it down from one generation to the other. So generational wealth is something that is rarely talked of in the low income groups. It's something that today is more common only in the high income group or the middle to the high income groups. But today we're going to talk about how it can be done. Within the next few minutes, we'll dive into more details about how it can be done. So one interesting factor with trees is that different trees take different time period to mature, and also different trees bring in different incomes. So one thing that makes it quite interesting is the fact that you have a choice, and the choice is not so much of something that is difficult to attain. It's quite attainable. So we're going to look at a couple of scenarios. So the first scenario we're going to look at today is a situation whereby someone starts with a few trees, and let me say, for example, 300 trees, or any number that you can afford, and then each period of time they add more and more trees. So it can be they start with 300 trees, and then every planting season, which would be the rainy season, they add more trees onto the ones that they already planted. So there are several assumptions that we're going to consider. First one is being that the same species of tree is planted each of the season. And the second assumption is that the total acreage to be planted has already been determined. And the other assumption is that all trees are planted in a land size of 1 acre. And the fourth assumption is that the species of the tree to be planted is a eucalyptus tree, which can be harvested more than once. The fifth assumption is that the seedlings to be planted are bought instead of being planted from scratch. So for this scenario, we're going to use eucalyptus, and in this video, we're going to consider eucalyptus tree. But then, depending on your area or the area that you plan to plant the trees on, you can select the species of tree that can do well in that area, both environmentally and economically. So with those assumptions in place, next we're going to look at the likely outcome. So a 20-year-old eucalyptus tree, as of today, that is June 2nd, 2020, has a market value of at least $150. So the other thing is that that is on the lower side. So therefore, after 20 years, if you have 4,000 pieces of tree on at least 1 acre, that is, the trees are planted 1 meter apart, and you grow them for a period of 20 years. The likely income for 4,000 pieces at $150 US a piece is $600,000 US. So the $600,000 US, that's a gross income. And the other thing is, the other cost you might incur would be the cost for caring for the trees for the 20 years that you grow it for before you cut it for the first time. And if we look at the cost for caring for the tree for about 20 years, it's quite negligible compared to the $600,000 US that one would get at the time of harvesting the 4,000 trees after 20 years. So the other thing is that one good thing is when the trees are harvested, you have another opportunity of making an income. That is, if you decide to cut down the trees for the buyer, that would be another opportunity to earn some income. Or the other thing is, if you decide to cut the trees into pieces of wood of various lengths depending on the specifications of the buyer, assuming your buyer is a builder who wants to use the trees for making a roof or for making the ceiling board, then if you cut those trees to certain dimensions, then that's an additional source of revenue. And the other thing is that the good thing with the trees is that once you grow it, then any additional expense after when you're selling it, that most of it is passed on to the buyer. So the beneficiary of the beneficiary is likely to pocket at least 600,000 US dollars, and if probably they pay a 20% tax on the 600,000 US dollars, they still end up with some pretty good amount in their pockets. The other good thing is that if you have several beneficiaries, then you can replicate what you did on the 1 acre, whereby, assuming you have 5 acres, you have 5 beneficiaries. So you can replicate what you did on the 1 acre and do that the same on the 5 acres. So for 5 acres, that would be $600,000 by 5. And that will give you how much your beneficiaries will get. So there are things to note on this first scenarios. That is, the first thing is that the figures stated are on the lower side, and the other thing is that the 20 years 20 years from today, which is the time of making this video. Remember, we used today's market value for a 20-year-old eucalyptus tree. So 20 years from today, that tree will be worth more than the 150 US dollars. Remember that there are the factors of demand and supply that are in play. One being that as the human population increases, there is less acreage of land that is under cultivation, and with that, then there's with the less acreage of land under cultivation, you find that people would more or less tend to cultivate food crops, and for those who are cultivating alternative crops like trees, then whatever is cultivated will be of higher value. The other thing is that the species planted can be harvested more than once. So the 600,000, that would be just for the first harvest. So if the trees grow for another 20 years, then that would be another about 600,000 US dollars. And the other thing is that after the 20-year period, the land where the trees grow will be worth much more. Again, the forces of demand and supply, as the human population increases, then the amount of land that is available, the price is likely to go up. So the other thing is that the land where the trees grow on will be worth more after 20 years. So the $600,000 US dollars, that's just on 1 acre. So if there's 5 acres, then you're expecting 3 million US dollars, and 3 million US dollars is a pretty decent amount if you pass that down to a beneficiary. So let's move on to the second scenario. So the second scenario, the tree still is eucalyptus. It's planted on a 1 acre piece of land, and the harvest period for this scenario will be after 2 years. And the other thing is that the eucalyptus that is planted is the one that can be harvested several times. And for the case of this scenario, we're going to harvest it 4 times. So there are several assumptions. The first assumption is that the entire 1 acre is planted all at once. Therefore, 4,000 pieces of trees are planted all at once. The other assumption is that the 4,000 pieces are all the same species of eucalyptus. And the third assumption is that all the pieces, the 4,000 pieces planted, make it to 2 years. So assuming all the 4,000 pieces that you plant, all of them mature. And the fourth assumption is that the selling price per tree remains the same during the entire 4 harvest seasons. So the 4 harvest seasons will equate to 6 year duration of 6 years. The fifth assumption is that all the amounts stated are on the lower side. So the amounts stated are on the lower side. All right, so let's look at the likely outcome. So a 2-year-old eucalyptus tree today, on today's market value, that is June 2nd, 2020, sells for about $2 a tree. Therefore, if you have 4,000 pieces you want to sell, that would be $8,000 if all of them are harvested at once. Therefore, if on the first harvest after 2 years you get $8,000, then for the second harvest, which would be after another 2 years, you're expecting for the next 4 harvests, that would be the entire 6 harvest, you'd be expecting about $32,000. That is $8,000 by 4. For the entire 4 harvests that we were talking about. So one thing you have to remember that the $32,000, that is if we are calculating the return based on today, that is June 2nd's market value. So remember that after the 6 years, then the price per tree is likely to be higher than the $2. Therefore, the $32,000 is on the lower side, and it is likely to be more than that. So the second likely outcome is that after the 6 years duration, the land on which the trees are planted is likely to be worth more. The third most likely outcome is that the scenario gives the beneficiary an opportunity to reinvest proceeds after a shorter duration. So instead of waiting to reinvest after 20 years, which was on the first scenario, on this second scenario, the beneficiary can start reinvesting the amount after 2 years. So assuming the beneficiary decides to reinvest after 6 years, what we'll see is that by reinvesting, it presents the beneficiary with a bigger opportunity to get bigger returns. So assuming, let's just look at an example. Assuming that half of the $32,000 profit is reinvested, that avails more capital to be reinvested. So remember that to plant 1 acre of a eucalyptus tree would cost about $1,000, and assuming that the taxes are paid on the 32,000 at 20%, so that would be the cost for planting the trees, which is $1,000 plus the taxes. That would be a total expense of $4,200. So if we take away $4,200 from $32,000, that leaves a net profit of $27,800. So if we reinvest half of the $27,800, half of that will be $13,900. So remember, the cost for planting 1 acre was $1,000. So $13,900 is likely to enable the beneficiary to plant, let me say, 10 acres on the lower side. So by planting 10 acres, if we're still going with the profit of $27,800 on 1 acre, if we want to know how much we'll get taking the lower figure on 10 acres, that would be $27,800 times 10, which would be $278,000. So therefore, after another 6 years, the beneficiary is likely to get this time $278,000. So assuming on getting the $278,000, the beneficiary decides to reinvest half of that. So half of the 278,000 US dollars will be 139,000 US dollars. So 139,000 US dollars at a cost of, let me say, 1,000 US dollars. So that would give them roughly about the ability to plant another 100 acres. So 100 acres, if we're still going with the lower figure of 27,800 US dollars on 1 acre, so that would come to 2,780,000 US dollars. So with this, we see that reinvesting proceeds gives an opportunity for the return to now double. So the beneficiary will be getting returns in double portions. And one good thing is that there is no limit as to how much can be reinvested or how many times the reinvestment can be done. But we see the benefit of reinvesting the proceeds. So one interesting thing with trees is that depending on region to region, there is a tree that is of high net worth. There is a tree that is in demand, and depending on where you plan to plant the trees or where you are, you can, if you do a research, then you can find a tree that is on high demand, something that you can sell and get good money on. So let's look at the 3 most expensive trees in North America. So the first one is the instant shade trees. So under the instant shade trees, there's 2 categories of trees that you're going to look at. That is the red maple and the American elm. That is American ELM. So one thing with the instant shade trees is that they are very popular with landscapers and homeowners. The homeowners and landscapers like to use it as something that would create shade within a short duration of time. And one red elm that is about 1 to 2 inches for one piece cost about $2 US a piece. And for the American elm cost about 1 to 2 inch, cost about $10 US. But the red maple cost about $2 US a piece. And again, just to repeat, the American elm cost about, that is 1 to 2 inches, cost about $10 US. So you find that assuming that you have you live in a house or you have a porch somewhere, you can be able to let me say you choose to do the American elm that once it reaches 1 to 2 inches, you can sell it for $10 US. What I would suggest is you might want to get the market first, probably with the landscape or your neighbors, or if there's a new residential place that is coming up in your area, then you can talk with them and let them know, hey, I have the American elm or I have the red maple, and you can make a deal with them to sell it to them. And this is something that can grow. You can easily grow on your porch. If you have everybody has a porch, or if you live in an apartment, depending on your balcony size, you can easily grow this and make yourself some money. So assuming you have even 100 pieces of the American elm, you can easily get $1,000. 100 pieces of trees is not so much. It's not a lot of trees. You can easily hold that on your porch or on your balcony. If 200 pieces is still not too much, that would be $2,000 US. So the next type of tree is the flowering dogwood. So the flowering dogwood is on high demand by landscapers. More specifically, the Kausa, Kausa dogwood is one of the most popular varieties. And the other thing, it also produces a crop of sweet red berries. It's also disease resistant. And the price of one Kausa dogwood that is 1 to 2 inches is $10 US. So that there presents you another opportunity to make some money. The third tree is the thornless locust. The shade master and the sunburst are the two popular species of the thornless locust. And the other thing is, good thing about them is that they are fast growing, making them popular for landscaping projects. They grow to a mature height of 25 to 30 feet within a period of 6 years. So I just threw this in there. So we all know that Christmas trees, people normally, some people like the Christmas trees fresh, cutting fresh trees for Christmas trees. So that would be another opportunity. You can grow Christmas trees and time them in such a manner that they get ready for cutting various sizes during Christmas season. That would give you some money also right there. And let's go continue. So the next trees we're going to look at is the most expensive tree in Africa. So that is the African blackwood. So the African blackwood goes for a market value of 10,000 US dollar per kilogram. So it's one of the most expensive types of wood in the world. So the next thing we're going to look at is the 5 most expensive trees in the world. So the 5 most expensive trees in the world, the first one is the sandalwood. Sandalwood cost about 20,000 US dollars per tree. That is a mature tree. So the other one good thing about sandalwood is that it's used in making perfumes, and it has a great scent, and it produces oil that is used in perfumes and ancient medicine. The other thing is the African blackwood. We already looked at that. The African blackwood, as I said, is 10,000 US dollars per kilogram. One thing is that it's an endangered type of tree, and it's found only in the driest parts of Africa. And it's highly valued because it's often made into pricey, high-end musical instruments. So one thing is you notice that about these trees is that what they're used for, the demand is likely to go up. Used for perfumes. As the human population increases, as the perfumes they're used in becomes more popular, then the demand is likely to go up. And one thing with the demand going up is it's likely to drive up their prices. So as of today, we're talking about 10,000, 20,000, but as the demand goes up, the value of these trees is likely to go up. So our third tree is the agar wood, AGAR wood. So for the agar wood, it also goes for 10,000 per kilogram, and it's native to Myanmar, MYANMAR, and the oil it produces is used in cologne and perfume, and the demand is growing therefore the price will continue going up. The fourth tree is the Bocote, BOCOTE, and it sells today at $30 per board. It's native to Mexico and South America. The reason why it's pricey is due to the unique patterns produced when the tree is cut into boards, and a desk that is made using this tree is likely to cost in the upwards of 20,000 US dollars. The fifth tree is the pink ivory. So the pink ivory goes for $8 per board. It's native to Zimbabwe and South Africa. It's valued for its gorgeous natural pink red color, and it's used in ancient medicine purposes, as well as the production of billiards and knife handles and all those. So one thing we've seen with all these trees is depending on the trees that does well on your area, you have a varied choice. You can choose something that is of high net worth to grow. We've seen some trees that goes for, when they mature, for as much as 20,000 US dollars. For that, if you have 10 of those, or if you have 5 of those, you have some good money for your beneficiaries. So one thing we've seen with trees, which makes it quite an attainable means for building generational wealth, is that trees are something that they almost grow by themselves. They are God's gift to humankind. They grow by themselves, and that makes them then one of the assets that would be good for creating generational wealth. It makes it much more attainable. One thing we've seen with some of the families that the rich families in the world today, for example, the Rothschild family, is that these families have built their generational wealth has been built over years and years of time, and they've built a very huge asset base. But the trees, something like trees, gives you an opportunity to start today, start simple, and start in a way that is quite attainable. The other thing is that we're coming into a time where when the smart contracts managed by the blockchain and all that is about to start being a way that contracts are managed. And with the coming in of smart contracts, it makes it possible then to leave certain instructions that would build and manage the generation wealth you leave behind for years and years to come. You have the choice of choosing how long you want the smart contract to run. Remember, we looked at an example whereby the beneficiary reinvests, and as a result of reinvesting, the returns come back in doubles. So imagine a scenario whereby one of the conditions of that you put on the smart contracts is that half of the return from those trees that are left behind as a generation wealth is reinvested, and that is to be done for, let me say, 20 to 30 generations. Then you find that the generation wealth that you leave will be able to grow and to help the generations that come after you. So with this, we see that there's really trees gives us a reason not to create generational wealth. There's really no reason why somebody should not create generational wealth, and as we've seen, again, it's something that is really attainable. So with that, we'll come to the end of this video. Thank you so much for your time. See you in the next video.